It's a secret, but it's an open secret. It's plain to all, but only if you see and understand. Then don't you understand this parable? Then how will you understand any parable? It's a secret, but it's an open secret. It's plain to all, but only if you see and understand. Then Jesus said to them, don't you understand this parable? Then how will you understand any parable? It's a secret, but it's an open secret. It's plain to all, but only if you see and understand. Then don't you understand this parable? Then how will you understand any parables? It's a secret, but it's an open secret. It's plain to all, but only if you see and understand. Then Jesus said to them, don't you understand this parable? Then how will you understand any parables?
Midwestuary 2025, August 22nd through the 24th in Elmhurst, Illinois. A weekend you won't want to miss with special guests Cale Zeldin, Paul Vanderklay, Rod Dreher, Elizabeth Oldfield, John Vervaeke, and Jonathan Pajot. Midwestuary 2025, the Fellowship of the Spirit. Stay tuned for more details. Visit us at midwestuary.com for ongoing updates.
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to the Sunday Chill Stream. After dark. After dark. Sorry I didn't stream yesterday. Ethan Kahi held it down. I don't know how long he went and why he didn't make it the full 24 hours / 30 hours. Not sure what happened there. Would love the update if anybody in the Hive Mind knows what happened late last night. But then had a pretty busy day today with my wife's. There's a wedding coming up on my wife's side of the family, and they are Italian, so there's a whole lot of drama around it, so everything's kind of crazy because they're Italian. They're very Italian, and they're all acting very Italian about it. I love my wife's family. But then my wife got on a plane to go on a work trip. So now here I am late at night. All the pets are fed. And I'm not as sleepy as I wish I was. So it's a good thing, I have the open internet, access to the open internet, and I can just make some music for me to chill out while I'm headed to bed. Hopefully give you guys across the world some chill vibes, even though the timing's different. It must be late over there, Yanni. Must be late. Can only take so much. Did you end up hopping on, Yanni? I mean, when Ethan first said he was going to do the 24-hour stream, I was like, I don't know about that, boss man. I don't know if you're ready for that, big man. For your first flight. For your first solo flight, you're going the full 24 hours, sir? It was a bold move. I think shouts out to Al for keeping him company for, I think, most of the day. But with all that said, I mean, there's a lot we could talk about. There's stuff in the news, wars, rumors of wars. There's a new Discord channel for the people who are really serious about having edifying conversations about truth and philosophy and theology. And they're not going to accept sloppy thinking. And it just so happens they tend to get kicked out of the other places that they're congregating. That seems to be have happened a few times now. Interesting. Not fun. What else? Yeah, World War III again. Probably bears mentioning once again. Yeah. Wars, rumors of wars. End time prophecies. I feel like for me this week, I was getting back into my Reformed roots. I read some Augustine. I listened to some R.C. Sproul. Oh, happy Father's Day, by the way. Shout out to all the dads. Saying R.C. Sproul made me think I talked to my dad tonight. Unprompted. Didn't even tell him I'd been watching R.C. Sproul. He gave a little dig to our good old R.C. So I thought about playing some R.C. Sproul because it's fun. It's nice vintage vibes, too, like nice 90s, 80s, maybe even 70s, but just like that vintage found footage. There's just a vibe about old sermons, old lectures. There's just a nice graininess to the film, to the image, nice graininess to the audio that I just can't get enough of. And even better if they're smart cookies. But instead, I thought that I would bring to our attention another one from OG Rose, his conversations with Cadell Lass. Cadell Lass, the mind behind Philosophy Portal, that hosted our very own C-Backs, Christian Baxter, YT, yours truly, YouTube. Also familiar with Luke's work, Luke Thompson, that is. And both Luke and, I'm not sure if C-Backs gets the mention, but Luke, TLC, and Paul Vanderklay mentioned in this.
Hegel's is very well on the positive.
And this is part 4. But this guy over here on the left, that's Daniel from OG Rose. Guy on the right's Cadell Last from Philosophy Portal. This is a good conversation.
Positive in there. Well, so
what up, Chad?
if you don't think, well, but that's the subjective destitute. That's the Jesus on the cross. That's the birth of the Holy Spirit. That's where those things go together. Where the contradiction entails the possibility of that positivity.
Let's say. So here's just a good example of this speculative thinking is like, the absolute negativity could be seen as the death of God. The positive contradiction could be seen as the subjective destitution,
Yes.
and that both thought together makes the Holy Spirit possible, or
Yes.
something like that.
100%. And you see that, but then that kind of goes to, I guess, what I'm saying on capital, is capitalism needs all of those to generate the very non-zero-sumness of capitalism, without which it falls into zero-sumness, right? You need all of those. If there's no space of Holy Spirit, per se, then capitalism eats itself. But that's not because capitalism is inherently, fundamentally, essentially broken. There's a condition that has to be met. In the same way that I would like to think that probably this would have to be argued. My impression is that every internal consistent system contains at some point what I call the Gödel point, the Kurt Gödel point, the point of that unveils that coherence is not correspondence. So theoretically, every single map, precisely because a map cannot be itself unless it is not the territory, but that very idea must be part of the map, right? If that could be found,
shouts out
then
to
the
our boy
possibility
Chad.
of
First
disenclosure,
Father's
or
Day.
the enclosure actually having an opening
To
should
many,
be
many more,
isomorphic
sir.
within every structure, if it can be found. Like, then the question is the subjective work to find it and realize it. And that's important because it would mean that we don't need to get people to change their maps. We need people to actually really think their maps and to really work it. And, and
the
that
map
will
is
bring
the territory.
And it will bring them to the Gödel point.
Yeah.
And that is the point of subjective
think-
destitution.
So with this, I think it's really important. Like, and again, what you've been thinking about, there's a paper in Global Brain Singularity where I talk about this as well, which is a reflective note for dialectical thinkers, which is, let's say the affirmation is the map is the territory.
Right.
And that would be more the Newtonian point of view. And sort of like a naive scientism where you equate the maps that you're constructing in science with the territory itself.
Yes.
And you kind of believe that or justify that because that map, say, can get you to the moon.
Exactly.
Right? So that's pretty cool. What that means is that you have a pretty powerful map.
Yes.
Right? Then you have the more, let's say, deconstruction of that modern foundation with the map is not the territory, where you're trying to create a gap
Yes.
between the map and the territory. And then I think the negation of the negation, and I think which is already implicit in Hegel, is that the map is the territory. And then the question is, when you think the map is the territory, then what you're doing is that all of a sudden, and this is how I think, is that all of a sudden the conceptual jungle becomes primary.
Yes.
Because because it's not just one map.
Yes.
It's that there's a bunch of indestructible maps.
Yes.
I'm not sure if
So
I can
all
go
these
for the
indestructible maps
map
have to
is
be
the
thought. But
territory,
the reason why we don't do
Hegelian
that is
speakingly.
because, one, we're either trying to build our own map,
Yes.
or it's too tiring and exhausting to understand, or we're just trying to learn someone else's map as our
Yes.
map, or we're too tired and exhausted by the complexity of learning all these different maps. Not only learning all these different maps, but learning about the way all these maps interface and interrelate with each other. And I think that's where we need the philosophical consciousness.
Yes.
That's because the philosophical consciousness, the dialectics, is your understanding, trying to understand the relation between all these maps,
Yes.
how they intersect, and you see the contradictions between them. You see the contradictions between them not as evidence that they need to be deconstructed, but evidence that there's a sort of a positive thing that we can work through.
Yes.
But that also, like that this jungle is kind of like a space of our unsublated violence.
Yes.
Like where you actually can see that these maps can be used as, these maps are weaponized, these maps are defenses, and at the same time, we can't just get rid of them for a state of, and this is a big thing, is that like where we think we can get out of language.
Yes.
So like we recognize that say that there's this conceptual jungle. We think, well, let's go back to a world where we didn't have these maps at all. So that would be another mistake.
Absolutely.
That would be another example of the totalitarian madness, where
Yes.
you just think nature itself can be asserted. Sometimes, I don't know, I'm definitely not an expert on this, but sometimes I think, like, when I've met some people, so concretely I've met some people who are like, say, Deleuzians and the becoming animal, where they actually try to like become an insect,
Oh yeah.
or they actually try to become like something animal-like.
Like bumblebee or whatever.
And this can actually like end up in like furry communities or
Yes,
something like
absolutely.
that. And I think that's another example of the totalitarian madness.
absolutely.
There's all sorts of ways in which the totalitarian madness can come. And that's why the future is going to be super weird.
Yes, absolutely. Super weird. Yep.
Heard it here first,
no,
folks.
well,
Super's
the thing
gonna-
is,
the
like,
future's
also,
gonna
too,
be
like,
super
whenever I hear,
weird,
like,
super
reading
future,
Quinn
super weird
Ismail
future.
or some parts of
Super
Diamond.
weird future
The
weird.
guns, germs,
Yeah,
and steel.
that's right. There's this idea that agriculture was a giant mistake.
Right.
You know, that we should have never settled, that this was the worst thing human civilization
Right.
ever did.
It's usually seen as the fall.
Yeah, it's seen as the kind of the fall. And with that, that's a certain return to nature. You know, if we become more, nomadic, then that's kind of the way in different things. But what you're doing is basically not thinking the now, right? You're like, well, consciousness is the problem. If we didn't have consciousness, we'd be more like bumblebees.
So there's a chapter in the book where, inspired by a conversation with Dave McCarricker and the critical media theory, I talk about McLuhan.
Yes.
And I see like this structure in McLuhan, like there's the way in which this fall structure reappears. It happens so many places.
Yes.
But like this fall from the primitive communitarianism, and then there's a way in which McLuhan, with the media technologies, starts to think about the global village as like a return to that, but on a higher level.
Yes.
Which also appears in Marx.
Yes.
Where like you get this idea of returning to the primitive communism, but on a higher level with
Yes.
the world communism. So like in McLuhan, this happens with the global village.
Yeah.
And again, like there could be, I'm not an expert on McLuhan, but there could be this way in which that's yet another way to not think the antagonism, the agonistic politics.
No, well, that's where for me McLuhan has to be thought with like Virilio, Speed. It has to be thought with Baudrillard. Like McLuhan, also too, I'm always very interested. There's a whole lot of talk on McLuhan, but not as much as William Ong. And I think William Ong, probably maybe perhaps because I guess he was a Catholic thinker in different things, but William Ong really wants to just emphasize how mediums change our subjectivity, and obviously that is in McLuhan. But in Ong, without getting too much into it, there's trade-offs. There's these trade-offs that have to be considered, and it's going to generate new antagonism. So I'll just give a quick example that Dr. Anton gave in a talk with Guy Senstock on Ong, which this is true, is the idea that once you learn to read, then you get a deeper, greater inner capacity, right? Like before that, if you feel the divide between feeling an emotion and showing the emotion was like that, right? But the more you become a literary society, the more you can split the expression of the emotion and the feeling of the
Which
emotion.
is like the intermediation and the self-negativity
Yep.
of the immediate emotion.
Yes, that's exactly right. And so there's an idea that literacy opens this inner
Possibility.
capacity. That's correct.
Yeah.
And William,
So that's scary because we're not reading as much in a sense. There's not many people we have a very illiterate society. And
Oh
then
yeah, I thought
we
about
also
you in
have
this part,
the
Al.
immediacy of screen being. So if we lose that capacity, I mean that could also be one of the reasons why we're trying to reclaim the pre-modern
Yes.
structures and
Yes.
defenses of
Yes.
consciousness, because we're recognizing that this screen being's eroding all of the things we've been building up over history.
yes. And I really like to see William Ong at kind of the center of this tension, because basically it's exactly what you just said. Okay, so we have this inner capacity that is necessary to handle lots of stimulation and lots of information. And if you lose that inner capacity, but you still have the products of that inner capacity in the new media, you're in trouble, right? And so there's this idea of, well, how do we balance it? And there's an idea of the pre-modern and different things. And actually, that makes me, one of the things, and then to Nietzsche, one of the things I wanted to say is, like, I was saying earlier on this difference between this kind of social noumenon, in a sense, that the counter-enlightenment is saying we need, or we're in big trouble, and the idea of kind of the Kantian noumenon of putting in the individual to save religion, and you could have all of these problems, right? What's very interesting is I would argue a lot of the effort of the pre-modern, or say going to religion, or why a lot of people are ending up in Christianity or going back to it, is actually a reestablishment of a social noumenon. Because what you're doing is trying to say, well, there's this thing outside that becomes the foundation of our personal life that then you don't think, you just believe, right? And in some respects, that's okay, but this is where thinking Hegel is like, no, the noumenon is in the phenomenon. Like, the limit is in it, right?
Yeah.
This is where the people critiquing social constructionism...
I think this is in Sloterdijk and Zizek as well, this tension.
Yes, absolutely. And so for me, what ended up happening, I read the Counter-Enlightenment people, and then is that, and it was like, okay, they're exactly right. But then I read a lot on Charles W. Mills' Blackness Visible, who's my favorite kind of thinker in that, and he passed recently, a Jamaican philosopher. I was reading your Foucault's, I was reading all these different people, and it was like, well, they have a very good point, right? That the very social noumenon, which another term is basically givens, the given, the norm, is oppressing people. And it creates normative action that then genuinely creates social injustices and different things, right? So wait a minute. In order to do what the Counter-Enlightenment is arguing we have to do, or we eat ourselves, there has to be a mechanism of oppression. And that tends to hurt minorities and create normative action that destroys creativity and all the other stuff, right? Oh, dang. And also, these givens are within the phenomenon. They are not, they are socially constructed. That is the case. Even if you say, well, the social construction is necessary and it is not arbitrary, well, there's still things we make. And also, they lose their authority once you realize we make them. So then they go away and we're overwhelmed by unmediated release. But then if you bring it back, you have huge trouble. But everyone is basically everyone is bringing back social noumenon, right? Mm-hmm. And the problem is, although those very same people very often will not like Kant. They'll be like, the noumenon is terrible, that's trouble. But because they don't recognize the social noumenon, they're actually going back to Kant in forms of the social. Mm-hmm. And that's where really taking Hegel serious, like you can, because you're strong. I don't want to say straw manning. Like Kant has become
if it sounded like you, Al, it wouldn't be very interesting to you, now would it? It would just be like hearing yourself talk.
Or maybe more implicit in Hegel is, and maybe something that becomes explicit more in Zizek, is that if you
I would be surprised if these guys, if you and these guys agree kind of
that you can't
one to one. You know, I think these guys will stretch you a little bit.
Going to require this tarrying with the monstrous, which you're going to experience as an obscene outside. You're going to experience it as something that's like an unsublatable excess, something that is thwarting your happiness and your peace and so forth.
That's right. Well, that's exactly right. And you see, you don't have to do that if you're just creating a new social noumenon, a given.
That's the type of thing that I think
the problem is you think you're not doing
is fine to
overlook.
overlook.
The problem is that there's other people creating different social noumenas.
That's correct.
And so then you again find yourself in the conflict and the competition between social noumenas, or this
but you can tell
jungle maps.
You can tell that Daniel is one of those guys who's like so literate that like a large percentage of his words he's probably read way more than he's heard said.
Throw a child into the madness of the
he's
real
probably he's probably read way more words than he's heard.
Enculturate and educate.
I'm probably the opposite. I've probably heard way more words than I've read.
Yes, and
right?
so
there's a weird way in which both are necessary.
That's exactly right. And so for me, by overly paying attention to the individual Kantian noumenon per se, and then people, especially like people talking, new metaphysics, emergentism, Whitehead, all of these different things, which of course these thinkers are geniuses, but the critique of noumenal thinking in Kant to open up new metaphysics, that very effort may be concealing the reestablishment of social noumenons that are actually the theopolitical question, right? Yeah. So you have to keep your eye on the ball, per se. Now, look, if talking about the problems with the Kantian noumenon leads to concerns of the social noumenon, that's fine. But that's what Hegel does.
The theopolitical is like an imminent question that is requiring a form of subjectivity that is willing to stay with it for their whole life.
Exactly. Yes, that's exactly right. Well, that to me,
which is like, people might, like, if you actually think about that, you're like, but that's exhausting.
That's exhausting. But that in a sense is true religion. True religion is every Sunday a certain regularity, but the problem is American religion became lazy.
Or a true theopolitician.
Yeah. And that that's funny. Is that what ends up happening is religion in America tends toward a self-sameness that doesn't have to do that work. The work is then...
So like we were talking this morning about the spirit of America.
Yes.
And I think even like where we came to is like, I think if you want to think the spirit of America, on the one hand, you can think, let's say, the Christian community that's the salt of the earth.
Yes.
And you can think sort of the Trumpian entrepreneur that's the king of New York.
Right.
And both are true,
Yes.
right? And but if you don't think them together, then the salt of the earth can get manipulated by the
Yes.
king of New York.
Yes, that's what happens.
Or the king of New York can be dethroned by the populist
Yes.
salt of the earth,
Yes.
right? So, but if you think them together, there is something higher order that doesn't yet exist, right? But in the American political context, I would argue that the Trump-Sanders phenomenon as a unity is pointing towards that something different. Not Trump or Sanders in themselves,
Yes.
but Trump and Sanders together producing something new that the current political system and the left and right coordinates of the quote-unquote establishment aren't capable of manifesting or realizing, as evidenced by the types of politicians that they platform and that they promote.
No, absolutely. Well, for me, it's Nietzsche because it is, what I like to talk about in Nietzsche is the critique of beastocentrism, because beastocentrism is a centricism on new social noumenons that you're just continuing. Because what ends up happening is basically Trump is a new kind of social noumenon. It's a new sort of beyond, he's outside, that has a certain effect, and it's bestowing. He's bestowing you direction, right? And eventually bestowing, which there's always going to be some degree of bestowing. That's not the problem.
He's bestowing you with a liberation day.
Yes, that's right. And then it turns out but then eventually,
We're liberated.
but that's actually great because eventually the bestowing betrays you and you rebel.
Yeah.
But then you look for a new bestowing to suppress the unconscious, and it goes on and on and on and on, right?
On and on.
And so for me, with Nietzsche, and this is our
Eper si muove.
Yep, yeah, exactly. And thus it moves, is that as we move from thought foundations to drive myths, is that because what ends up happening is the drive myth for me is on the problem of assuring that we don't reestablish new social noumenons. And you need a new drive myth to make.
And then what I'm trying to do in that second section with the drive myth is not turning Nietzsche's drive myth into a new social noumena.
That's exactly
which
right.
I think Nietzscheans might you could fall into that trap.
Absolutely, but that's where for me it is so important to take seriously Book 5 of the Gay Science, and that which I do think is so important that he writes the end of Book 4. Then he goes off and he does, I think, Beyond Good and Evil, or The Genealogy of Morals, one of those, forgive me. And then
Thus spoke Zarathustra.
and then he comes back and does Book 5. And so Book 5 is fascinating because Book 5 is where he's critiquing, in the same way that Derrida is considered a critic
A
of
woodchuck as
logocentrism.
much wood as a woodchuck could chuck if
likewise,
a
I
woodchuck
think
could
Nietzsche-
appreciate
I
the
think Nietzsche's a
finite
quote-unquote
resources and
core
endless
Yeah,
appetite of
logocentrism, I
humanity.
think.
Yeah, well, there you go. So is that Nietzsche there's a core to his thinking, and what he's seeing is that how people in the death of God are going for something new to bestow to them. Like they're still getting bestowed their social noumenon from God, but then in Book 5, they're getting it from science, they're getting it from nationalism, they're getting it from their job, they're getting it from meaning. And he goes through in Book 5 and shows that there are still all of these are sources of a new social noumenon.
I want to say in regards to because I think this is so central to the Peterson phenomena.
Yes.
So you have maps of meaning,
Yes.
right? And then connected to Peterson, you also have Vervaeke with the meaning crisis.
Yes.
And I think that the Zizkian moment is that the point and the necessity of absolute knowing is actually to transgress or resist, depending on where you are, the temptation of meaning.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Right? It's the absolute knower is someone who's willing to stay with the non-meaning, but not fall into the abyssal negativity that is implied and could
100%.
potentially be a risk of the absolute
100%.
knowing without the return. So like if you just have the absolute knowing as a linear thing, then you do have that risk,
Yes.
right? Where the society of absolute knowers just becomes a society without a community and without the capacity to reproduce itself.
That's correct.
Right. So you have to be able to be able to resist the temptation of meaning while recognizing the dialectical integrity and the necessity of meaning.
Absolutely. Well, for me, this is where the name of the game is not to say, the moment you become conscious that my life is meaningful, then you've reduced it. That's the kind of funny thing to make. A lot of times the meaning crisis conversation is a critique of reductionism, but actually to say my life's meaning is X must automatically reduce it.
So I feel like this is like the drive myth for me. Like what I've been saying, what I say in the book is from Lacan, it's drives mythify the real.
Yes.
And what I've been saying is like that you just have to put. It's like you say the first things. Like I'm saying, first thing is drive, And if you put first things first, then you
Chew
get
the
the
meat
second
and
thing,
spit out
which
the
is meaning.
bones, Al.
Yeah,
You can
so
do it.
that's
I
right.
believe in you.
Practically, that's how I've done Philosophy Portal. So like with Philosophy Portal, is like I just focus on the drive, and then what happens is that meaningful things happen.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
meaningful things happen to me,
Yes.
but they're not things that I orchestrated to happen. So like for example, I could take the collaboration with Peter Rollins, I could take the collaboration with Theory Underground, or I could take the collaboration with you.
Yeah.
Where I didn't know in advance any of these things would happen.
Right.
Right? But I just focus on my drive, and I have faith to drive.
Yes.
And I just focus on the drive as, like, I just take this from Peter Rollins, that faith is seeing the positive contradiction in the drive.
Yes.
And if you have faith to that, then again, it's kind of like meaning starts to wash over you in unexpected and surprising ways.
Yes. Yes.
So, but that is a type of social noumena in a way, but it's not something that I'm constituting. It's something that I have faith will constitute me.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of like that. I also took this from, you pointed me to a text by C.S. Lewis, and I took that from C.S. Lewis, that it's kind of like in the same way that, it's not what you think about God, it's what God thinks about you, that I think the same thing about the social unconscious, or what we're talking about, the noumena, that the social unconscious is not what you think about the social unconscious, is what the social unconscious thinks about you.
That's right.
Right? So like that's a really useful way to, and I think that, so like if we make the connection between C.S. Lewis's God and Lacan's social unconscious,
Yes.
then I think we actually have, like, I'm really serious, like if you combine those two, you might have the model of a theopolitical.
Yeah. Absolutely. Look, Lewis is Lewis is
And then that would, and I actually think so, like, take that further, like, so you have Lewis's God and you have Lacan's unconscious as the theopolitical, and I would almost say, like, that is something which would be the structure of a conversation that I'm trying to will into existence. So if you're listening, I'm trying to will this into existence with the power of my speculative reason, is that I want to put Paul Vanderklay on the metagelical side as Lewis's God.
Yeah.
And I want to put Peter Rollins
Yes.
on the evangelical side
100%.
of the Lacanian unconscious. And that's literally two active projects that I think need each other, where you have the metagelical and the evangelical, and both could create an enclosure, where the evangelical could create an enclosure around the abyss, and that would be the non-dialectical negativity.
Yes.
And then the metagelical could create an enclosure with a traditional Christianity, which isn't taking into consideration the theopolitical.
Yes.
Right? And so then you put them together, and I think that you have the foundation for something that could be a really interesting theopolitical project.
All right, let's run it back.
Take the collaboration with you.
Yep.
Where I didn't know in advance any of these things would happen.
Right.
Right? But I just focus on my drive, and I have faith to drive.
Yes.
And I just focus on the drive as, like, I just take this from Peter Rollins, that faith is seeing the positive contradiction in the drive.
Yes.
And if you have faith to that, then again, it's kind of like meaning starts to wash over you in unexpected and surprising ways.
Yes. Yes.
So, but that is a type of social noumena in a way, but it's not something that I'm constituting. It's something that I have faith will constitute me.
Absolutely.
So it's kind of like that. I also took this from, you pointed me to a text by C.S. Lewis, and I took that from C.S. Lewis, that it's kind of like in the same way that, it's not what you think about God, it's what God thinks about you, that I think the same thing about the social unconscious, or what we're talking about, the noumena, that the social unconscious is not what you think about the social unconscious, is what the social unconscious thinks about you.
That's right.
Right? So like that's a really useful way to, and I think that, so like if we make the connection between C.S. Lewis's God and Lacan's social unconscious,
Yes.
then I think we actually have, like, I'm really serious, like if you combine those two, you might have the model of a theopolitical.
Yeah. Absolutely. Look, Lewis is Lewis is
And then that would, and I actually think so, like, take that further, like, so you have Lewis's God and you have Lacan's unconscious as the theopolitical, and I would almost say, like, that is something which would be the structure of a conversation that I'm trying to will into existence. So if you're listening, I'm trying to will this into existence with the power of my speculative reason, is that.
Oh, is that what you were
I
on
wanna
about
put
last
Paul
night, Chad?
Vanderklay on the metagelical
You got tired.
side
You got sick
as
and
Lewis
tired
is
of all the
God.
thinky talky.
And I want to put Peter Rollins
Yes.
on the ex-evangelical
100%.
side
100%.
of the Lacanian unconscious. And that's literally two active projects that
Eye
I
of the
think need each
beholder,
other,
Al. Smelt it, dealt
where
it.
you have the metagelical
Careful.
and the ex-evangelical, and both could create an enclosure, where the ex-evangelical could create an enclosure around the abyss, and that would be the non-dialectical negativity.
Yes.
And then the metagelical.
All right. The ex-evangelical can form an enclosure around the abyss in the dialectic of negativity, as he says, which is a... Well, I'm not going to explain it. I don't even know if I could. And then what's he going to say for the... He later he's thinking of this metagelical side as the Paul Vanderklay side, as the TLC side, as the Vander feet of clay.
Create an enclosure with a traditional Christianity which isn't taking into consideration the theopolitical.
Yes.
Right? And have the metagelical and the ex-evangelical, and both could create an enclosure, where the ex-evangelical could create an enclosure around the abyss.
I've been in
and that would be the
ex-evangelical spaces.
non-dialectical negativity.
Yes.
And then the metagelical could create an enclosure with a traditional Christianity which isn't taking into consideration the theopolitical.
Yes.
Right? And so then
So they see the metagelical, or he sees the metagelical on the side of tradition, in a sense, which is interesting. It's interesting. So you can see how we're perceived here. Do you see? See how we're seen? Do you see how we're seen? See with me how we're seen.
you put them together, and I think that you have the foundation for something that could be a really interesting theopolitical project.
A theopolitical project. A theopolitical project. I mean, Christian nationalism is a theopolitical project. I wonder what you mean.
I cannot agree more. So a few things. First, meaning has to be a glimmer, a surprise, not something you plan. It has to be something you're prepared for. The key is also that meaning can destroy you.
Oh, meaning will destroy you.
So it has to be something you're prepared for. Now, to Vervaeke's defense, I think he would perhaps say, and rightly, this is why he emphasizes the Kyoto school, the Nishishanti, the apophatic nothing as the source of meaning, where meaning has to come from this orbiting, like Schindler will talk about in different things. However, that's where I think it is important to follow Vervaeke to where he is now. I think it is thinking, because again, but then I would say to Vervaeke is that although I strongly concur with the emphasis on meaning having more of an apophatic culture, so it has to have an apophatic quality, or you make it kapophatic and you destroy it and it actually becomes problematic, in the same way that theologians debated forever the tension between the kapophatic and the apophatic, and my favorite on it is Austin Farah, where he's trying to bring together Aquinas and Karl Barth. But anyway, there's this tension, but the issue is you can talk about the apophatic all day, but if you're, not that Vervaeke doesn't know this, but if you talk about it, but
Right.
the logic of capital is still in the institutions and the politics and et cetera and so forth,
Cataphatic.
you're going to be
Someone like Luke Thompson in the TLC, he said, "My past was apophatic, but my future is cataphatic." And I think that's interesting for someone who's gone the orthodox way.
Yes.
It's instructive, like we think about but also like on the meta tension between, let's say, Vervaeke.
Guys, let's at least try to keep our anti-intellectualism to a minimum. I know they use big words, but God makes smart people too. God makes thinky-talky people. It's okay for them to exist. I feel like you guys are in kind of a... I'm getting some... Is this projection, chat? Am I projecting, chat? I feel like the chat is... you guys are blowing me up right now, and I kind of liked this talk. And You know, I thought we could just chill, but you guys are bringing bad vibes. I think the beat's not good enough yet. Is this all my fault? Am I not working fast enough?
And Pajot,
Yes.
where like Vervaeke's probably going more the apophatic, and then Pajot's maybe more the cataphatic with the
You're not that Vervaeke doesn't know this, but if you talk about it, but
Right.
the logic of capital is still in the institutions and the politics and et cetera and so forth.
cataphatic.
You're going to
So
be
someone like Luke Thompson in the TLC, he said, "My past was apophatic, but my future is cataphatic." And I think that's interesting for someone who's gone the orthodox way.
Yes.
It's instructive, like we think about but also like on the meta tension between, let's say, Vervaeke and Pajot.
Yes.
Where like Vervaeke's probably going more the apophatic, and then Pajot's maybe more the cataphatic with the orthodox symbolism and stuff like that.
It's very interesting because the tension is so actually, because I can't help it, is Austin Farah, his entire kind of question of this tension, and he thought this tension was going to destroy, almost destroy Christianity between the capitatic and the apophatic, and I would say it's actually that is the theopolitical problem ultimately that is tearing everything apart. And so Austin Farah was very interested in the role of sacrament and symbol, and the question is the following: is a sacrament apophatic or capithatic? And of course, it is in this between space. If I say that God is a lamb, well, you know what a lamb is. So I'm making it capithatic, but also, do you really think that God is a lamb? Of course not. A lamb has nothing to do with God, and yet does at the same time. So there's a being and nothing logic, of course. There's a becoming logic and he's locating it in the theology of the analogy. And he's like, and also what Austin Farah points out, basically kind of like Saul Kipsky, as Joel has talked about, and this is true, is that all thinking is analogous. And Hofstadter and surfaces and essence, you can't escape analogy, because when I say to you, hey, there's a cow over there, you don't remember the definition of cow, you summon a memory that you associate with that sentence, right? It's not a linear thought, it's more of an analogous thought that is in operation. So the first thing that Farah wants...
Like a rhizome?
Yeah, like a rhizome, absolutely. And so
A web of associations.
it's a web of association. So the first thing that Austin Farah wants to point out, as the great William Wilson, my beloved...
You guys are crazy.
the
This guy's very
professor who
nice.
I took as many classes as I could with, and I adore, and he talks about in his work, is that Austin Farah is like, the apophatic-capithatic distinction is in one way false, because you are always making things...
Chad, you're being a hater, bro.
Right?
You're being a hater.
They're always being as a nothing.
Yeah.
Right?
That's identity depends on that.
Exactly. And so all of identity...
Even if your identity doesn't necessarily... That's the thing, is that doesn't reflect on that. Like, it thinks the identity is the overfit. That's the overfitting.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so Austin Farah is trying to say that the apophatic and capithatic... This is the kind of funny thing, is that Austin Farah might be another of those thinkers who's basically pointing to the science of logic and not knowing about this.
So I think people need to know about this, is like, so Hegel's making a distinction between a scientific philosophy and a philosophy of science. His science of logic is neither. It's the philosophical sciences.
Yes.
So a scientific philosophy would be kind of like
Guys,
Marx's scientific socialism.
This stream is very
A
voluntary.
philosophy of
This stream is very voluntary. You don't have to be here. If what I'm playing is making you upset or boring you or you don't like the way the guy talks, you don't have to be here. Man, this is why I can't do these late at night. I get too tender, I get too sensitive. You guys are probably just yucking it up, having a good time, and here I am getting my feelings hurt on the open internet. I miss my wife.
science might be like Thomas Kuhn's paradigms thing. What Hegel's trying to do with the philosophical sciences is he's trying to outline a literal project in which philosophy itself could make progress.
Yes.
And the fact that that has been ignored by continental tradition is a tragedy, a potential tragedy.
Hey,
And again, it's this problem of reinventing the wheel or stumbling upon to something that already exists, or actually because you didn't study it, you're recreating it, but a worse wheel. So in many ways, like the Philosophy Portal project is kind of saying that the philosophical sciences is an established project that if we pick it up and we take up the challenge that it implies, it's not that we're just reducing or just imitating or repeating in a non-creative way. It's that if we pick up that challenge, by definition, something new could happen just by virtue of the fact that we're picking up that project in the time we find ourselves.
Yes. Oh, hey, Goodell, had it not been for you, I would have been one of those people that ignored Hegel. So thank you, sir, because because you don't know what you don't know, right? And and so I'm in your debt. But this is what has occurred is because, and then what ends up happening is the time taken to reinvent the wheel takes away the time and energy needed to think the now.
Yeah.
So it is not a inconsequential mistake.
And there is a way in which, like, there's a truth to what, let's say, like, because I grew up in a time where scientific materialism was basically saying that we don't need philosophy anymore. Right? Like, and I'm thinking about not just people like Richard Dawkins, but people like Stephen Hawking.
Yes.
Like very big names in the physics and the biologies and even psychology, saying we don't need philosophy anymore. And in a way, this is the result of philosophy not taking up the philosophical sciences project.
Correct.
Because in not picking it up, they make themselves irrelevant, because what they do find themselves in is spinning in circles or creating bad wheels.
Yes.
Right? So there is a truth to that. But I think that for me, the importance of Zizek, and again, like, I'm not really like I'm not an academically trained philosopher.
Sure.
What I am is someone who studied the sciences to their logical conclusions, and then found myself in need of philosophy. And then I thought that, like, there's a weird way in which every moment of every field can become overdetermined by a very important thinker.
Yes.
And I think so for example, my window into evolutionary biology was Richard Dawkins. I took him as it's like the particularity of Richard Dawkins gave me the window into the universality of evolutionary biology. Or for a lot of people today, the particularity of Jonathan Pajot is giving them a window into the universality of orthodoxy.
That's right.
Right? And so for me, all it is like the particularity of Zizek as someone who I think gives us this, what would the philosophical sciences look like if you just carried through to their conclusion in the 21st century?
Yes.
Is like, that particularity gave me a window onto philosophy.
Yes.
So that's kind of so it's not that like I learned philosophy in like a undergraduate program. It's that I came to the necessity of philosophy. I needed philosophy, not because of a degree, but because I needed to think certain things that I couldn't think without philosophy.
Right. Exactly.
And Zizek was a particularity that opened me up. And I want to say that, like, for me, it's kind of, and this is a method that I've used independent of philosophy, with the examples I was giving of Dawkins as a window into evolutionary biology, is that I really think it's important that we reflect on the need for a living thinker in order to open us onto a historical field.
Yes.
And that we do ourselves a disservice if we just are interested in a historical field, but we ignore the living window that gave us that historical field.
Yes.
And the challenge there for us emotionally and sort of psychologically is that and we should be very skeptical of ourselves with this. And I think even like take this as a kind of red flag if you're thinking about like thinkers that you take seriously online, is that it's easiest to think with a dead person.
Yes.
Because they're dead. They have nothing to respond to. They're just in the past. It's more difficult to think with someone who's alive, and it's most difficult to think with someone who's alive and you have a living relationship with them. Right? So like for me, like I mean that actually, because I can give that example of like, I really had a difficult relationship with my PhD supervisor, but in what I learned from that relationship is I learned the importance of this.
Yes.
And so from that failure, I learned how to cultivate a real relationship with Zizek.
Yeah.
And I've learned how to cultivate a real relationship with Peter Rollins.
Yes.
For example, like these are windows into universes that you can go deeper with if you're actually capable of handling the self-relating negativity of actually thinking with and in another living thinker's project that you admire, that in some sense you're in debt to, right?
Well, what you're saying about knowing a living thinker, that to me is what the social coordination mechanism is so much about in using the internet correctly. Is like actually coordinating to make yourself be in relationships with living thinkers. That's why it's so hard, and perhaps it could be argued that...
In the TLC, they call this coming out of lurkerdom.
Very nice. Yeah, well, there you go. And you see, for me, because it is so incredibly difficult to have a relationship with
I feel like he talks about us like we're...
the probability of finding one that you could do it without being
He
destroyed,
doesn't talk like us as if he's one of us. You know, he does use the term they, which is interesting. And the TLC, they call this coming out of lurkerdom. What is it that we call coming out of lurkerdom?
Mechanism is so much about in using the internet correctly. Is like actually coordinating to make yourself be in relationships with living thinkers. That's why it's so hard.
To make yourself be in communication with living thinkers. So that's how they see this. They see this. This is their perspective. Does this make sense to you guys? Are we tracking here?
And perhaps it could be argued that...
In the TLC, they call this coming out of lurkerdom.
Very nice. Yeah, well, there you go. And you see, for me, because it is so incredibly difficult to have a relationship with a living thinker, then the probability of finding one that you could do it without being destroyed, one-off, like at a university, is very low. But with the internet and the social coordination mechanism, you have, you say, well, that didn't work, let me try another. That didn't work, and you can't try. And it's just like market forces. Like the key to the market when it's at its best is a testing center. Like you test products. Let me try this lab. It doesn't work, let me do this next one, right? There's nothing wrong with experiment and testing precisely because we don't know what is best until we try, right? You take a guess, you try, and you need to have the ability to mobily work until you can find what is fitting, and then you can learn different skills, and you get a chance to learn the skills of being with a living thinker, right? Because that is not obvious how to do it, right? Well, that is what, for me, social coordination, this mechanism allows. That is the most difficult thing, but it is the necessary thing for the theopolitical.
So I said this before, is that I studied Bostrom's superintelligence. Then he released a new book called Deep Utopia.
Yeah.
Where he's trying to think about like more the positive, like, and he gets stereotyped in superintelligence as a apocalyptic thinker, or negative thinker. And then in Deep Utopia is trying to explore the positive side. But he does say in an interview with Alex O'Connor that he doesn't, even in a deep utopia with AGI handling everything, it wouldn't solve the coordination problem.
Correct.
That coordination stays apart. And even my PhD supervisor, a great cybernetician, I think a world-class cybernetician, he himself is just wrestling with the coordination problem in many ways.
Yes.
And so this issue is really fundamental, and so just connecting this to our networks is that we've got the idea of this dead internet theory where increasingly the algorithms and the AGI, so there's also the technological singularity and the global brain singularity, is that you've got the AGI and the algorithms which are in some sense hollowing out the internet.
Yes.
And one of the reasons why I pay attention to the Paul Vanderklay stuff and the TLC is because I think they're wrestling with the dead internet theory as well. Like, and they're trying to create these, they're recognizing that that's why they think that these YouTube channels...
We're wrestling with dead internet theory. I'm a real person. I'm really here. Virtually not alone. Actually real, McMo. You can actually hurt my feelings. Especially late at night. I don't know why Ron's mad. Thank you. Thank you, my anonymous sir. Just trying to make some chill beats, y'all. Listen to some cool philosophy, smart dudes, people smarter than me. Talk about stuff. I like listening to people smarter than me.
Those are like the life rafts.
Yes.
Because they're saying like
fire ants.
The fire ants. Because they're saying like we're like the internet's dead.
Yeah.
Like, and all we are in some sense hollowing out the internet.
Yes.
And one of the reasons why I pay attention to the Paul Vanderklay stuff and the TLC is because I think they're wrestling with the dead internet theory
Yes,
as well.
I
Like,
think
and they're
so.
trying to create these. They're recognizing that that's why they think that these YouTube channels are like the life rafts.
Yes.
Because they're saying like
The fire ants and all
the
that.
fire ants. Because they're saying like we're like the internet's dead.
Yeah.
Like, and all we've got is this dead thing where we're trying to construct
Yes,
some
yes,
life rafts
Yes.
to the real world.
Yes.
Right, so that's what we're trying to do, and then the problem is the coordination, and then the coordination and the enclosure, and then you can have the enclosure and the nothing, or you can have the enclosure and a certain social noumena,
Yes.
right? And then we're trying to deal with all of that, and like that's what philosophy is for.
Yes. 100%.
So that's why the philosophy is necessary.
Well, and 100%, and philosophy, if our situation is bubble wrap, you can't address bubble wrap without philosophy. And but then it's coordinating the bubble wrap, because if you don't have coordination, then you may have a bubble wrap, but practically it's bubbles, because there's no coordination of them, or they're going to pop each other, right? So if you're dealing with bubble wrap, you have to be careful not to pop them, right? So that's a coordination issue. And if you don't have any coordination, then it's practically just bubble.
Ready?
Right?
What's
there
happening,
has to be
big dog?
coordination to have it be actual bubble wrap, which is the condition of, voicecraft, rhetoric, non-zero sumness, etc., so forth. But we've never been able.
We're
but
just
the
listening to
the
these guys,
coordination
these smart
problem
guys
in
yap,
this
Freddie.
context is the
And I'm about to drop the link when it's
theopolitical
done.
and ergo the problem of how to keep the bubble wrap from popping.
Yeah.
You know how to do that, right?
Yeah.
And that
The fragile absolute.
the fragile absolute. That's exactly right. And the death of the internet then is a kind of forcing function
Yeah.
to force the consideration of it. So a few things also is that when this idea of meaning, glimmers, etc., so forth. To me, that's why I get into things like self-forgetfulness. Meaning has to be a product of a certain self-forgetfulness. You can't think about meaning. It has to be just something surprises you when you come upon it, right? But then that means meaning requires skillfulness to handle.
Well, the weird thing, and this comes up in your thought, I think, is like the relationship between the self-defense and the self-forgetfulness.
Yes.
So like the self-defense is the enclosure.
Yes.
And necessary.
Yes.
Right? Like it's just
That's
like we're just trying to avoid that. Like to me, and this is in systems and subjects, I try to think the dialectic of openness and closeness.
Yes.
Like we can you can and to some degree in the progressive thinking, like you can start to deify the openness.
Yes.
Right, like and you say, well, like ontologically things are like objectively open.
Yes.
Things are objectively incomplete.
Yes.
And so then the traditional closures are like myopic and self-limiting.
Yes.
But so like you need the self. It's a dialectics of self-defense and self-forgetfulness.
Yes.
So like the self-defense is like let's say the self-defense is the phenomenological journey at different levels.
Yes.
And then the self-forgetfulness is the absolute knowing.
Yes.
And then you have to have, but then you could get lost in the self-forgetfulness in a way that you don't want to come back to the world of self-defense.
That's exactly right.
Right? So somehow it's the relationship, and that's very, very hard to do because it's hard to detect sometimes whether you're in a situation where you need to be self-forgetful or if you're in a situation where you need to be self-defensive.
100%. And that for us is that problem is what we'll talk about as the problem between fear and wisdom. How do you tell when it's wisdom? How do you tell when it's fear? Right? And that is like an uber question, because that is really hard. But to what you said, exactly right. Because self-defense creates an enclosure. You're enclosed, right?
Yeah.
But you don't use it. You don't close unless you have to defend yourself.
Right.
Right? And then self-forgetfulness means your openness is where you don't think about the openness. You're just open. It's not conscious.
And the problem is if we're in the conceptual jungle, like the thing is this: you need to self-defend yourself because someone can come at you with a weapon.
Yes.
Someone can come sneak up behind
Yes.
you. Someone can be watching you from a different distance, ready to take you out.
Yes.
Like that's real.
Very real. And if you don't have self-forgetfulness, you're going to be taken. But if you don't have self-defense, you're going to be taken. And
Yeah.
the key is you have...
If you don't have self-forgetfulness, then you're going to be the one imposing
Exactly.
and all this stuff.
That's exactly right. So you have to self-defend yourself. You basically only want to be self-conscious in self-defense, and then immediately go back into self-forgetfulness.
It's another example where this dialectical thinking is so important to understand because you start stumbling upon all of these one-sidedness in your own self-discovery of
Exactly.
your own conceptual map.
That's it.
Right? Like where just give an example, like in one podcast you can be emphasizing the self-defense, in another podcast you could be emphasizing the self-forgetfulness.
Yes.
But then if you're a dialectical thinker, you can be, oh wait, there's a dialectical relationship here.
Exactly. Well, actually, it's so funny you mentioned that, because one of the problems that I constantly find is language itself is not dialectical, and time does not allow you to talk about everything at once. And it's so bad, it's so hard.
Language as space versus language as time.
Exactly. And so, like, for example, I'm often discussing the problem of autonomous rationality, which creates the impression of rationality is bad, but really it's the point to the dialectical, but then you have to get there, and most people just hear the term, and
We're always trying to save rationality.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
we don't want to be like
100%. That's
like
the whole
this
point.
whole conversation. This whole conversation is made possible by rationality.
100%.
But this whole conversation is also made so it's there. It's nested, right? Like say consciousness, self-consciousness, reason, spirit, religion, absolute knowing. In many ways, this conversation is made possible by the entire series.
Yes, exactly.
Right? It's just understanding the right place and the right, the context and the nesting of all of these relations, which is incredibly difficult.
It's a gestalt, and the issue is it's scope. You're just zooming in of the same structure. You're looking at things, zooming in, zooming out, and very often what creates the impression of exclusivity is actually a scope movement, a movement of the lens that you're talking about in order to see the whole, because you only see the whole by going in and out, in and out, in and out. And you see, honestly, I sometimes think the language between parts and wholes, reductionism and emergentism, sometimes I wonder if a language of scope might be useful, a language of lens.
Language of scope.
Because otherwise, because that is what you're doing. You're moving the lens around, and if you're not careful, then, because the reason I also like the language of scope is because scope entails subject. It entails the movement of the subject.
Somehow scope and scale.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Also,
My dog is
There's
very
a-
confused
there's
as to what's going on right now.
A good friend I made.
Why are you
in
doing
my-
this so
my
late?
doctorate, his name's Clement Vidal, and
yes,
he's. I think you met him, or he was in the portal.
yes, he was. I mean,
He was
did
at a Theory
talk-
Underground
yes,
event,
yes.
and we've done talks on
Yes,
the New Sphere and
yes,
stuff like that.
Yes.
But like, he's really interested in. He thinks there's this French and he is a guy named Notal, and he's like, and I've looked him up. Like, he's a very well cited and respected physicist for the last few decades, but he's kind of like in actually a sort of French milieu. So many people in the English world don't know about him, but he's well cited in the French world, which I mean happened in philosophy, right?
Yeah,
Where you have
yeah.
these French theorists and stuff like that. But like, he's less enclosed in the French world, probably because he's in mathematics and physics, so there's more of a universality there, or at least a communication pathway there. But he's trying to build on Einstein's general relativity with this idea of scale relativity. So of course general relativity has this idea of the observer as well, and quantum mechanics also has this idea of the observer. But there's this relationship between scope and scale, which is coming up in physics as well.
That's fascinating, because for me, one of the ways you deal with the problem of scale is simply to say that there is a certain whole. It's a question of scope of the scale, and then you have to have the spread to have the foundation to be able to handle different scopes. Because if you don't have enough spread, you don't have a wide enough, like we were saying, the difference between scale and spread.
And all of this is a model for like the central contradictions we're struggling with the local and the global, the virtual and the physical. Right? You need to have the scope and the scale.
Because without the foundation, you can't handle seeing the different scopes. Like, if you look at the global, you lose the local, or if you look at the local, you use the global. It's all about what is the kind of subject that can handle scale. Like, it can handle scope, which reflects different scales, right? Because Hegel is giving us a kind of gestalt, right? And that's a magic word, but it does have meaning. But gestalt is like, it's nested. It's this nested structure. And the key is the ability to look at the nest from different scopes and be able to then not get overly wedded to a part, but also not so loose that you're not tearing with it, but then to go back in different forms. And this, you could connect this, and I do like when Vervaeke talks about the optimal grip.
I was just getting
It really do be like that,
Yeah,
Jan.
it's the
It
optimal
really
grip
do.
kind of thing, which to me I've always kind of associated with conditionalism. A certain condition that has to be met in order to be able to handle the scope.
Now you could
etc.
think about that in a biblical and an evolutionary way with the apple and the fruit in the garden, and like the immediacy and the mediation of that fruit, as well as our evolutionary history where we're picking fruit in the jungle, and like we're looking for the right fruit, we're looking for the all of this is connected in an interesting way.
Yes, and today that fitted, the problem is when you have abstraction and complexity, part of fittedness is the ability of optimal grip regarding scope on scale, right? Where if you're in the garden, you can see the fruit, you can experience it. Now we're having to have optimal grip regarding quote unquote abstraction, right? And to not get lost in the abstraction as we're finding the grip, and we don't even have the where do we learn those tools, right? So you have a problem of optimal grip regarding that which you can't hold, and so what do you do, right? And that requires a certain foundation and work of the subject to be able to handle and not be lost in.
Absolutely.
And that also, because there's a certain skillfulness here, another term like this self-defense and self-forgetfulness, I also associate this with the difference between auto-cannibalism and auto-mastery. Like auto-mastery is where you're so skilled at something you can do it without thinking about it, right? Like you're so good at baseball that you don't have to think about hitting the bat. Like the best wrestlers, I always saw this because
the best hitters are. They're not. They've made it unconscious.
That's right. They've done it through so much
because
work.
The pitch is so fast they can't think about it.
No, and the best wrestlers, I always was amazed when in wrestling, because I admittedly thought a lot, except there were like 5 moves I got to the place where I didn't even think about it, I could just do it. But there were these wrestlers who just could do any move without thinking about it, and they were the best, right? Because they had auto mastery.
Yeah, people underestimate how much intelligence is required for athletics, like holistic intelligence.
Exactly right. And so the tension is, if you don't figure out the relationship between self-defense and self-forgetfulness, then you're going to end up in auto-cannibalism.
Is there a nickname we could give you, Mr. Kabbalah?
Right? The right relationship
Kabbalah?
between those things is going to lead to auto-mastery.
Kabbalah
right?
Harris.
But it's one thing to talk about auto-mastery regarding wrestling, when you're feeling the body. But what does it look like to be a conceptual auto-master, like a Hegelian auto-master, like a scope auto-master? What does that mean? How do you do that? What does it look like, right? This is precisely, for me, the skill that follows from the theopolitical and that follows from the reality of bubble wrap. Is to be able to actually have auto mastery, because there's something like you have to be able to handle, because here's the other issue.
You know, if we're going to keep meeting like this, we should have a nickname for you.
Requires a handling that doesn't pop the bubbles, but you could be incredibly nervous the whole time. Oh my gosh, what do I do? What do I do? You have
anxiety.
Then the anxiety. So the handling of the bubble wrap is going to require an auto mastery if one is not overwhelmed by it. But where does the skill of the auto mastery come from? Right, in the metaxas, in the between, in the coordination, in different things. But there has to be, and for me, what we're talking about here is an auto-cannibalism, an auto-mastery of the mediation between the unconscious and the conscious, the madness and the rational, the non-rational and the rational.
The problem is always, like with the conscious and the unconscious, you can have people who...
All right. Shouts out OG Rose. I thought this was a very cool conversation. Thank you for letting me play it for you. I'm now going to drop the link. And you guys can come in and play. I'll play some branding. And then on the back end, I guess we'll hop back into it. Feel free to come and play. I probably won't be on for like super, super late though. Like I don't think I'm going to go for like 4 hours like I normally do. I mean, I've already been live for an hour. I mean, good grief.
Hey, Grim Grids, we all could use some savings throws up against the mind control. Give the skull a dice to roll. Then at least we'll have a chance to see the foe before he sneaks around behind and does his best to land a blow. How's that? Of the free will to not see.
Yeah, sure. Because it's there the whole time, and it's part of you always knows it's there. But that's where free will comes in, is what you accept and reject. And I don't know where I'm going with any of this, but
you're evidencing the heart of the corner, is where you're going. Very intense.
This, like, the best definition I've ever, or at least that I've heard of hell that I adopted, was like, it's where God's not. And depending on your worldview, he can be pretty hard to see here. Like, you have the free will to not see.
Yeah, sure.
Because it's there the whole time, and it's part of you always knows it's there. But that's where free will comes in, is what you accept and reject. And I don't know where I'm going with any of this, but
It's the heart of the corner, is where you're going. Very intense.
Speaking into someone else's mind. And I guess it sort of made me think a lot about, what marketing does and how the branding works. And I guess it just made me think that having this kind of knowledge really, well, I think that it can, I guess it somewhat can protect you. Protect you from the dark arts, as they would say. But it's true, though. Like, you need to recognize that these things happen. And when you can realize that these psychotechnologies are, all of the programming that's built into your TV set. This is what Grimm talks about all the time, peeking into someone else's mind. And I
don't think they're doing that. I think these insufferable douchebags are so in love with the smell of their own farts, heads so far up their own asses, that they genuinely believe that they're big stars in some capacity, and that if anybody talks about them, they do it because those people that are talking about them want their attention or want attention. I don't think they're doing that.
Yo, yo, yo. Oh, I forgot this one's super long. I gotta cut it off. Yo, Freddie D, what's up, baby? You're muted. You're muted, Fred. I gotta unmute you. Oh, you're still muted. You're muted. You look like you're chilling, though. Oh, there you go. I'm muted. What's up, Mr. Fred? How are you, sir? Well, I thought you were. I mean, anybody? Can I get any? Somebody give me a lay of the land in the comments to see whose internet is poor. Fred, I don't know if you can hear me. It seems like your connection might be bad. And now he just looks frozen to me. No sound from who? No sound from. What about now? Can you hear me better now? Test, test. 1, 2. Frozen but chosen. Good to see you, Dan. Well, I guess I just have to play another piece of branding.
Tell me that you've lived here your whole life. No, not yet. Are you married? No, man.
Fred's back.
Hey, what's up, yo?
There he is. You're a little quiet, but I can finally hear you.
What's good with it? Well, the Pacers beat OKC, but they play OKC at home this time. OKC at home. So,
Yeah, well, OKC beat them the last. It went OKC or went Pacers, then OKC, then Pacers,
yeah,
and then OKC again. So it's tied up.
yeah. Who you for?
I think I'm rooting for the Pacers. I think I'm rooting for the East. Got to represent the East
Oh,
side, baby.
yeah, that's your side, the right side. You have the left side.
Well, what'd you do today? Did you go to church?
Oh, I always go to church. You know that. Man. I gotta go to church. That's my
Did you
thing.
sing?
Yeah, I'm in a choir.
Pastor Paul was out of town, right?
Yeah, he'll be back Saturday.
Who preached
But
a sermon? If Paul wasn't there, who preached a sermon?
oh, they did an old video of
They just played a video of Paul, like he's one of those fancy megachurch pastors, just up on a screen.
yeah, I know.
That's crazy. You're gonna have to let him hear about that.
That is funny. Anyway, Bowtie is getting married, or if he already is.
Oh, I didn't know
Oh,
that. Bowtie's getting married. Well, that's the
yeah.
end of that. We'll probably won't see him much anymore. He'll be hanging out with his wife all the time.
Nah, we'll see.
Think he'll still
Anyway,
go out with you guys and play the boombox and stuff, sing songs?
no, they're from Ridgecrest.
Are they
They're
really?
not. No, yeah, they're not from Sacramento. They're from Ridgecrest. Ridgecrest. I'm sorry, Ridgecrest. And they go to a church out there. But he came down here to visit one time, and then since then we've just been doing music, doing that. Oh yeah, look for Fred Schuler J. Fred Schuler dash J4W at gmail.com. That's my web name. And you can look at it out. And I have my own show. I got Paul's show. And if you want me to do something for you sometime, let me know. Because
How
I
much
got
for a
like
feature? How much for a
nothing,
feature verse?
nothing.
Free features. You heard it here first, folks. If you want a
Yeah,
feature from Freddie Funk, then you
yeah.
gotta send him an email.
Yep, that's right.
So y'all, you didn't get to freestyle today. I didn't see a Freddie and Paul show, so y'all had to skip for today, huh?
Yeah, we didn't have the Freddie and Paul show because no one else could hold the camera, and I guess we could have went on Humorous channel, but we didn't do that. But that's okay. And then I went to Subway, and I had Subway. Hey, there goes another
Oh, you
commercial.
had Subway for lunch?
Yeah, a foot long. It was heckin'
Ooh.
good. Ham and cheese. It was on hit, dog. I'm trying to let you know, man.
I bet your stuff. You're trying to take a nap now, huh?
No, 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 no. I'm talking to you. I'm really listening to you guys today. Ain't nothing else going on. Ain't
Well,
no
that's what we're here for. Be virtually
no
not alone.
no hog. I got my dig out. I got my lib out. No. But I gotta hear you rap, Big Mo.
Well, maybe one day in person. We'll see. We'll see.
Okay,
If you treat me nicely.
I will.
Well, with
Hey,
that, I'm going to invite our other guest onto the stage for the late night chill stream. Mr. Chris Moore, welcome back, sir. I got to change the layout so we can see everybody. And we
okay.
got
Hello.
three people. We got three people, so I'm going to take off the bubble here. What you up to tonight, Chris?
Um, Not much to be quite honest. I did essentially I cooked for about 4 hours. Well, prep and the actual cooking itself and all that stuff. So yeah. And in the meantime, I'm basically getting the fallout from basically from yesterday. Um, you know, no King's protests and
You protested no kings in Canada?
no, no, this, but I did put that stuff on my Facebook, but whatever, doesn't
But
really
you have
matter.
was it about the King of England?
Nope. Well, it was basically about no King's Day, um, in in the U.S. Although I am a Canadian and I live under a constitutional monarchy, for all intents and purposes, I am a Republican in the
Whoa.
sense
So you're
that
MAGA.
no,
You're
no,
full
I'm not.
MAGA
No, I'm not. I'm not a
Republican.
Republican. I'm not a Republican in the sense of the terms of the U.S., but I am a Republican as in I don't care about the monarchy. So it's like anyway. Well, it's because anyhow in the UK or being a Republican, as in you know, like it's actually in the books. It's a um like a capital offense by treason. It's just people don't really bother to essentially invoke the law. Since a long while. So yeah. Anyway, but I digress. So, yeah.
Sorry, my phone died while I was in the middle of that, so I had to run back inside. Yeah, I don't know what to make of that, Chris. You have a king, but you're a Republican, but you're not a Republican because you don't like Donald Trump. So it's a little confusing for me. I thought when they were protesting no kings over there in Sacramento that they had enough of that stinking basketball team, but I don't know. Ron, what say you, sir? Welcome.
Dude, McMo, what's happening, chef?
Nothing much. Just kind of staying up after my bedtime because my wife's out of town.
I see that. Hey, dude, do I have an echo on me?
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
you do.
My bad.
Oh, hold on.
That's my fault. You should be better
Oh,
now.
okay. Okay, cool. So I was just busting your chops, dude, a little while ago. I'll be honest, I was in junior high. Those guys you were playing, they were good. Don't get me wrong. I don't.
I got.
Fred,
What?
you leaving or you staying? What's going on?
Well, I think the internet's kind of relegated the decision for him because he's kind of going in and out. But
Oh no, Fred froze again. Ron, I hear you, bud. No hard feelings. You know, it's totally fine. I definitely get the peanut gallery thing. Hey, speaking of peanut gallery, do you know what happened yesterday with the live stream?
Okay. Oh, really?
Oh.
Yeah, doing okay, good. Yeah. Which one? I was visiting my mom in Ohio yesterday.
I think there might be a delay or something. What's going on?
On me? Is this on me?
I don't know. Do you have a delay? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay.
yeah, he has a delay actually. But
yeah,
whatever.
so there's a delay for you, Ron.
Oh, wait. Let me fix something. I'll be right back.
Yeah, and his screen died.
Come on, phone.
Meanwhile, my dog is like, why are we up so late? Why aren't we in bed already?
Yeah, well, for me, I'm basically like, funny enough, usually I hit the hay about around 10:30, but I wake up like at 6:30 in the morning. So anyway, it's just. I think it's like
You're early.
Yeah,
early to rise.
I'm pretty much like. I don't know if it's like this cranky old man phase that I'm basically like metamorphosizing into it. Now that I'm like in my almost mid 30s, so it's like yay. But anyhow, whatever.
He's back. Ron's back. He just hung out with his mom all day yesterday.
Yeah. So I have no idea what happened to any live stream yesterday.
Well, Ethan was doing his big, apparently it was supposed to be like 24 hours. And I went to bed thinking that he still had like, 12 hours to go. And then I woke up and there was no stream. It had gone. It was disappeared.
Oh, yeah. I want my money back. Pitiful.
If you've been let down by promises of a 24-hour live stream that didn't finish, feel free to donate to my Ko-Fi.
Ko-Fi, yeah. That's right. Help McMo heal. Hi, I'm one of Jerry's kid. One of Jerry's. Wow, that's bad. I don't want to go down that road.
I'm one of Paul Vanderklay's kids.
Right, PVK's wayward children. What were those? And I'm not. I know those guys are deep that you had on here. They knew what they were talking about. What were they talking about?
Yeah,
Help
so
me,
maybe first for some context.
Yeah.
They have been a landing spot for many a person that has kind of waded through these estuarial waters. And, some people come and it's like they find their spot, right? And it's like, oh, this is the band of misfits that works for me. Sometimes people can't hang with all of the deep stuff. It's just not their cup of tea. They'd rather talk politics or sports or whatever. You know, they're not interested
Mhm.
in theology and philosophy.
Mhm.
And then there's some people who want to go deeper on some very specific strains of philosophy. And I would put these folks in that category. And so there's kind of
Right.
like, they speak their own language, and they're a little bit not a part of the corner, but there's like touching people, right? There's people who participate in live streams around the corner who also know about and participate in stuff that OG Rose is doing. So they're kind of corner adjacent. I think in general, the topics of discussions tend to be a little more philosophical, a little more abstract, a little less kind of on the ground, or like we talk about church a lot, right? Like around here, and they don't really talk about church as much. So the other distinguishing thing is that they take a lot of what Marx said very seriously. So a lot of the people that kind of talk with them are on the political left of things. Whereas a lot of people on our side of things are much more right wing, and so they don't like Marx as much. But I will say that they're kind of like a step up in terms of rigor, intellectual rigor.
Yeah.
So they're smarty pantses. So what they're talking about was a lot of stuff, and that was the last part of a 4-part long conversation. So it's a little bit unfair for me to just play the last part, but that's where they started talking about TLC, so that's why I wanted to play it.
Right.
But the things to note were that play nice, Nathaniel. Everybody be nice. Everybody chill. I'm glad to have mods like Nathaniel J. Franco out there and Yon God do the best to ever do it. I only make trolls mods on my page, but so yeah, what were they actually talking about? They brought up a few things, but they were basically positioning us in the quote unquote corner as being on the conservative traditional side of the same coin as what Peter Rollins, which is somebody that Luke talks about a lot, is doing with idea, and Slavoj Žižek are doing with the idea of like ex-evangelical, right? So there's so they're making the philosophical point basically that if we combined forces with all of these wacky ex-evangelical Christian atheist types, we could have on our hands a real political movement to deal with that would, perhaps have enough influence culturally to push people towards a type of new way of living for the current place we find ourselves, both within history and within the eschaton, you could say.
Well,
Ron, you go first, and then Chris.
Okay. So that's kind of Vervaeke land, and I'm not trying to be sarcastic.
It's not completely Vervaeke land. They're kind of they know who Vervaeke is, so they basically know pretty much all of the big characters in TLC.
Right.
And they even watch a lot of TLC content. Both of those guys do, and you'll see them comment from time to time. But I think mostly they pay attention to Luke and to PVK, and maybe to Christian Baxter. This is funny. But so yeah, like they're connected to the network, but they're not like a part of the network, if that makes sense. I could use different language.
No, because that's the first time I've seen them. I'm like, wow. All right.
Yeah, they're smarty pantses, but they do a very similar thing to our live streams, except it's more constrained, and he kind of only invites certain people on, but it's like a free-flowing conversation. It's called the Net, and they do not include comments or live comments or anything, which is kind of interesting too. So it doesn't get much traction. Like it doesn't, like I probably have live streams that get more views than it, But in terms of
Right.
high quality, forward thinking, interesting philosophical conversations, it's very fun to listen to. And it's not it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea.
Right. Well, I was getting swamped. That's part of the reason I was teasing so hard. I was like, because I was getting it, but I'm like, dang, dude, these guys.
And
Yeah.
they were kind of recording a conversation they were having, right? So they weren't slowing down to explain stuff that they
Right.
knew the other guy knew. And
Right.
I'm in there. I'm in the same boat with you. Like I've watched that video probably, well, I guess only 2 times now, but
Mhm.
and so yeah, I'm not catching all of the references. And it also doesn't help that like Daniel does pronounce some words in a different ways from time to
And
time.
he does sound like Hermit or like Peterson and
He
Helium.
talks very
And I'm like,
fast. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, dude, I mean, just being childish, I had to do something
Well,
on
and he
that. But
thinks fast too. That's the thing. You can tell that
okay.
he's thinking and
Yeah.
talking very fast, which is
Yeah.
a dangerous combination, And so
Right.
I don't know. Like I think a lot of times people come on TLC streams and they're used to being like the smartest person they know, And so I think it's
Uh-huh.
always good to kind of point up and say, no, there's some real smarty McSmart
Oh,
smart
yeah.
pants doing some real
Well,
smarty McSmart smarty pants work. That's good.
what's their and what their name? What's their name and what's their
The
website
channel
and all
name
that?
is OG Rose, OG, like the original gangster,
Oh, yeah.
and then Rose like the flower.
Okay.
Um,
All right.
and so
Smooth.
the guy's name is Daniel, and he runs the page with his wife, and so they have lots of conversations with people, with each other. Daniel's written lots of books.
Mhm.
Yeah, they're very smart people and very forward thinking. And they've read a lot of books, right? Like
Right.
a lot of
Yeah,
philosophy,
yeah.
a lot of classic literature, the great books, that kind of thing. Chris, you've been waiting patiently. What say you, sir?
Chris,
Lost
we
Chris.
summon you. We summon thee, Chris.
You're muted if you don't know, Chris.
Summonization.
Sorry. It's just like I kind of mute myself because I don't want to do that. But
Oh,
anyhow, from what I understand, like your previous statement, Mo, is that essentially, like, from what I understand, is that the climate, like the socio-political, economical climate that we find ourselves into, no, in part because of the Orange Man down south. Um, Most of you are not exactly content of where we are at. Am I right? Is that a fair assessment?
No, I think it's probably the we that we're talking about is too diverse of a group to kind of say that would be true of everybody. I think what you're talking about broadly is kind of like liberalism versus a type of dissident right or a monarchism or
Theocracy.
yeah, theocracy. I mean, I don't know of anybody who's like legitimately pushing for an actual theocracy or thinks that it's like possible or probable in the next 10 to 15 years. Though I hear a lot of people worried about theocracy, and I'm like, the people who would be able to do theocracy are not interested, and the people who so it's basically just the idea of theocracy, in my opinion, is just being used by people on the left and the right, and it's not. I don't think that it's something to be concerned with. I think that it's mostly a red herring, but that's just me.
Well,
That's my personal opinion. There are other obviously there are lots of people who would disagree with me on that.
okay.
But
So let's go from there.
yeah, that's kind of my perspective on it.
Okay. So
Theocracy, not a threat.
and I'm just well, so you think that theocracy is not a threat, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's a threat.
Okay. As somebody that's ideologically on the quote unquote other side, I do think it is a threat, an actual, real, credible threat.
Why do you think we're on opposite sides?
Well, as in what I mean by opposite side is that like I'm an atheist.
Are you calling me an op, fam? Are you calling me an op right now, fam?
No, I am not.
Are you moving slimy, fam?
I'm not trying.
Do you like my Canadian slang?
No. No.
I thought it was all right.
I don't use fam as something
Toronto slang, fam?
as terminology, but whatever. I usually use the word gang, but whatever.
Gang,
But
all right.
that's 90s kid in me. Anyhow, that's just the 90s kid in me, I guess. But yes, what I'm referring to is that on the side of the internet that I essentially most of the time like collaborate with, which is the atheist space and the somewhat progressive, let's say like the progressive Christian wing, which to some people think that they're non-Christians, blah blah blah. We'll just kind of put a pin on that later for a later discussion if you want to, whatever. But that's where the general space where I essentially operate. I don't exactly go to the conservative.
Would you say that you were a smooth operator?
I don't know what you mean, but I guess what you're saying is that I like to bounce a lot. Like
a smooth operator.
Yeah, like I like to bounce from group to group. It's what I do socially, like in IRL, anyways, by my own thing. But like the first person that actually kind of helped me get into your sphere is basically James Apperson. But anyway,
yeah. Hey, I got a beef with your buddy James. He clipped my stuff and was, he was pretty. He didn't like what we were saying. He was basically like making fun of us to his followers. He was like making fun of us. Why did he do that, dude? That wasn't cool.
He doesn't really. Well, from my perspective, he doesn't really make fun of people.
Well, now I got to pull up. Pull up what he said about me.
Until he basically just until you kind of start making.
Oh, so you're blaming the victim now? Bro, come on.
Like what I'm saying is that
me, and you're taking his side because you guys both don't believe in God.
All right, let's go. Show me the receipts.
All right, I gotta find them.
All right, show me the receipts and tell me where do you think that he's bullying you?
He said that I was in self-deception denial of my slave mind paradigm.
Well, that makes sense to me, but like what? Like, sorry,
you don't see why that would hurt my feelings?
I get where he's coming from.
How should I respond to being told that I'm in self-deceptive denial, which is redundant, of my slave mind paradigm?
All right, let's go to this receipts then.
Also, did he do it? Did he mean it for it to rhyme?
No, not that I know of. But he likes to write a lot.
Is that an Alien Ant Farm lyric? Self-deception, denial of slave mind paradigm. Anyway. That sounds like some corny Gen X.
Anyway,
BS in my opinion. He said that about me and Neil. He clipped it.
All right. Well, just show me the receipts.
It's kind of unkind,
Show me the receipts.
All right, I'm sharing. Let's see. What's the easiest way to do this? Let's share my screen here.
But it doesn't detract from the point I wanted to make earlier about
that he's not a mean bully pants.
No, I'm talking about theocracy. A theocracy being a threat to modern society, and it's not just Christian theocracy; it's also Islamic theocracy.
Read it and weep, Chris. Your buddy James bullying me.
Okay.
Christian in self-deceptive denial of their slave mind paradigm.
You're actually muted, though.
No, I'm not muted. Was I muted?
No, tap it to unmute.
No, I'm not playing the video. I mean,
okay.
I'm just showing you. This is just a screenshot. This is just the receipt.
Okay. And that's when. Sorry, could you just kind of redo the thing? When was this?
Well, I mean, the screenshot was 17 minutes after it was done, which is a, shouts out to my sources with some quick handiwork
But
there.
you got the date. I'll check it out to see where.
You need the date. You need the date. Why? What? You think I'm lying to you, Chris?
No, I'm just asking.
Why you
so,
want?
because
why,
I haven't, as somebody that does not really know his exact opinion.
You want to see the
right now.
context to see if I actually was in self-deceptive denial of my slave mind paradigm?
I mean, in the grand scheme of things, maybe.
You think it's
Or
possible that I was
No,
in
but
self-deceptive denial
But it's
of
just
my
a
slave
title.
mind paradigm?
What I'm saying is that you are just making assumptions based on the title.
I'm not making an assumption. It's a rude title. It's Christians referring to the two on the screen and self-deceptive. And that was after I was so nice to him, Chris. You know, like it's kind of weird, right? Why would he do that? Would you like it if I clipped out this portion of our conversation and said atheists in self-deceptive denial of their mastermind paradigm?
Well, it's kind of a little bit mute because I get essentially like apologists basically bash what I get to say, not on a daily basis, but it's just like via generalization, like like on a regular. So it's not exactly
so it's like it's okay because atheists get bullied by Christians. That's why it's okay for James, who I've been kind to bully me.
If you go to his space, I'm pretty sure that he's pretty kind to whoever comes in, but
then he just posts clips of their content and calls them self-deceptive denial of their slave mind paradigm. So he's saying that I have a slave mind paradigm. And then he says I'm in self-deceptive denial of it, so that I don't admit. I lie to myself and I don't admit that something about the paradigm with which I live my life is that of a slave's mind.
Yes.
What does he know about a slave's mind? What does he know about me? Why would he write any of this stuff?
Basically, he's just writing a blog, and
so he's picking on me. He's using me for content. That makes me feel much better, Chris. Much better. At least I'm just being used for content.
So, this is a public forum. We are allowed to critique, review.
Yeah, and I'm allowed to get my feelings hurt. Where are the morals? Where are the ethics for these kind atheists? Where I let them onto my stream, I let them talk, I peacefully disagree, and then behind my back, they clip my streams and they talk about me being in self-deceptive denial of my slave mind paradigm. It's just a weird move, Chris. And it's your buddy, it's your friend who's doing this. And like, yeah, sure, he does it to me. I'm just some nobody Christian streamer who barely gets like 200
And he's a
views.
nobody atheist. So what?
But what if he did it to you?
Maybe.
Chris, if he said something like that about you in public, it would make me sad for you.
Okay. I don't know if from a scale of 1 to 10 you feel offended, but judging from
you don't think it's that big of a deal? I'm not really. I don't actually feel that offended, to be completely honest. I think this is fun.
Not really.
So you think it's not a big deal that he was mean to me and he said that I was in self-deceptive denial of my slave mind paradigm?
If you are really offended, then I am sorry. But it's like, from my experience, James is pretty much very generous towards theists that thinks that it's like an argument that they don't he does that with people that he doesn't necessarily agree. However, he's going to be brutally honest with what he thinks, and that's what I can basically give. But yeah, so
So I just have to take it, I guess, hypothetically.
Yeah, I guess if you have to, whatever. It's not it's not as a vicious thing as you think it is.
So you're gatekeeping any chance of restoration for me, or restitution, or equity even.
If you want restitution, equity, that's a conversation between
I think
you.
he should donate to my Ko-fi. What amount of money do you think would be appropriate for him to donate to my Ko-fi for me to just kind of?
I cannot speak for him. I cannot speak for him. I'm not his.
I'm asking your opinion though. What would be appropriate amount of? Okay, so if I clipped you and said something that wasn't true about you, and I said that you were self-deceptive and that you were in denial and that you had a slave mind paradigm. If I said all of those things about you and you didn't like it, how much money should I pay to your Ko-fi?
I don't do this for a living, man, and I don't do. I don't. And I don't.
Would you forget this ever happened if I gave you $5?
No, I don't want. I don't want your money.
If I gave you $50, would you forget this ever happened?
Like I said, I don't want your money.
What would it take, Chris? What would it take?
It would take probably a conversation, privately, maybe, but I think it's essentially because you think that it's in the public space that you think you have been humiliated to some degree and fashion.
He really did. He really did drag me in front of the whole world.
Well, it's not much I can do because you are two different people. So, and I am not in charge of both of you. So
we gotta get you in charge of us, Chris, so you can settle this dispute for us. Because I don't know how we're gonna.
But the thing is, I'll tell you this: if he thinks that he has burned somebody, he will essentially tell you, usually in private, once, and after that, it's all up to you. And if you want to engage in that, that's fine. If you're not, well, it's not much I can do about it. So
you think we should handle it behind the scenes?
Yep, that's between you and him, and you, whatever that this is.
So we're gonna have to talk. We're gonna have to speak like men behind the scenes to settle our beef.
Yep.
I think we should have a rap. I think we should have a rap battle. I think I'd wash him. Welcome back, Ron.
Thank you.
Anyway, so, but to my point about theocracy being a threat, it's more, at least on the Christian side, it's the ever increasing thing of Christian nationalism, and that's one of the things of why I'm in on the internet talking about, because it's something that I do not abide by, and I will never condone.
Which is worse, the Christian part of it or the nationalist part of it? I'm not trying to trap you. I'm actually curious.
Okay.
Well, the theocracy, and in this case, for the United States, it's Christian nationalism that's on my chopping block.
So wait. So you'd be okay with kind of like a secular nationalism?
Oh, Unreich, Unwoke, Unfear. Oh, wait, that's already been taken.
Anyway, but
that was a pretty good German accent, Ron.
Thank you. Sorry, Chris. Didn't mean to interrupt you. My bad.
Anyway, so what I'm saying is, like, if you want secular nationalism, or if you want by dictionary book definitions, patriotism is just fine. It's just the theistic flavor of nationalism that I do not abide by, and that also could also include Muslim.
Atheism? What about atheism? What about an atheistic nationalism? Is that something scary? And I'm not trying to be too sarcastic, but
So,
maybe just a little
well,
bit.
it is sarcastic though, but I think
Yeah,
what you're saying is, should we be like the CCP or
right.
Stalin? Or usually
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
Ron,
the
do you
that's
know? Do you know any Christian nationalists? This is coming up in the chat.
No,
Mark,
actually, I think if anyone here has a right to talk about Christian nationalism, um, not as an expert, but I live right next to the area where the KKK started,
all right, no need to
and I'm
brag.
not like it's like Alexandria, Indiana, and I'm not proud of that, but it's just a fact. And to be honest with you, no, I'm I'm I have not met, and I live with some seriously right wing people, and they're not all about making America a quote unquote Christian state. They have values that are absolutely Christian, but they will die defending your right to disagree with them.
as it currently stands right now, I have a hard time believing that. But
Well, my
that's
friends were in
just
the military. No, my friends are in the military. Like they are, and not just a few of them. And they will follow the orders of the government because that's their job. And even if they, like, even when Biden was in office, they're like, dude, my job is to do my job. It is not to do my will. Once you're in the military, and they would they wouldn't let their opinions be known. But at the end of the day, what changes the government for them is voting. And if you and that what they do is they'll get into politics at the grassroots level. If they're like, if you don't like something, deal with it. And it's not by force either. So anyhow, long story short, no, I do not know a lot of Christian nationalists at all. So, I'm not the end all
Doug
be all.
Wilson.
Who's that?
Doug Wilson. Doug Wilson.
Don't know.
Moscow. Is it
Chris,
Idaho?
what if you
Or
know more? What if you know more Christian nationalists than we do? That's kind of
maybe,
weird, right?
maybe, yeah. Maybe I do. Maybe I don't. I don't know.
That makes you kind of
But
sound like a Christian nationalist, low key, dude.
nope, I am not. Because for the most part, the theistic side of things, um, that is something that I am allergic to, um, like in a figure of speech, but but still,
Chris, can I say something? And I
yep,
don't mean to interrupt you. So just when everything was going down in LA, one of
okay,
my friends, um, and I'm not going to, you guys don't know this person. They're like an end time doomer. They're Christian and they're not, they're just waiting for the end to come every freaking day.
the
And
rapture crowd.
yeah, yeah. And I'm not hacking them. But let me give you my take on it. When they sent me some stuff about LA and like this is the beginning of the end and all that. Now it's in the corner. We call this is woo. All right. And this is just another word for spiritual interactions between us and God from a Christian perspective. Within my, this is a moment of confession, McMo. You might appreciate this. Within my heart, not even saying it, I thought to myself, I hate this stuff with all my heart. And immediately, now, Chris, buckle up because word for 30 seconds. I had a spirit, a very painful spirit, hit my hearing. It sounded like a Horcrux from Harry Potter. That bad ringing sound when it was accompanied by pain. And it was for well over 24 hours. And I'm like, oh, crap. This is my fault. What am I doing wrong? And I was talking with Afril on his stream the other night, and we teased it out. I was angry at a Christian, and I'm not saying this guy was right, but what I had to do as a Christian was to actually, in front of Afriel and a few others, I'm like, I confessed that I was offended, that I was angry, that I was wrong, and I had to pray for the dude, that the eyes of his understanding, of his heart, would know the heights, the depths, and the breadths and widths of the love of God. In my opinion, that's what if you want to know what Christian nationalism would look like, it would be, hey, I'm sorry for that thing I got offended at. Now, this is what I think you did might be wrong, but I'm sorry for what I did wrong in my response. And I just got better, like, it was earlier this morning that finally lifted off me. So, if anyone offends you, and this, especially me, like, it's going to sound odd, but suck it up, turn the other cheek. Yes, you're allowed to call it out, but know that people are fallen. They're going to act mean and irritated, especially if they don't even want to know Christ. They're going to act within their own understanding, and they're doing the best they can, and they're jacked up. And to expect any kind of good or perfection is really it ain't happening. So, but with a Christian, at least from my perspective, from my obligations for myself, it is to genuinely love my neighbor, to love God with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength, and then to love my neighbor as myself. And my last words, I hope, would be, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. So that's the long way, what I had to say. And thanks for listening. But that was my rant.
Well, what's your point exactly? Like
Well, here's the thing. You're talking about Christian nationalism. Okay, show me the Christian nationalist czar, guru, and manifesto, because I haven't seen one to sign up for. Not that I want to. And then
like I
show
said,
me, take.
Doug Wilson.
Don't know.
Doug Wilson
Sorry.
is an example. After that,
But
there's Locke.
does he really represent me? I'm a Christian. I don't know who he is. Are you saying that? And I'm coming at you a little bit. Are you saying? And I don't know if I should come at you, because if this is going to be about Christianity, then let's define Christianity.
It doesn't need to have a hierarchy, actually.
Let's keep it chill, boys. Other than that,
All right.
anything's on the table. Anything's on the table. Just keep it chill.
Well, okay. I guess McMo, then what I'm looking for is correction right now. I'm not looking to be right. I'm looking to honestly present what I think I don't see. I don't see a groundswell of Christian nationalism. Yes, there might be some voices, and I'm sorry if I'm coming across a little bit, wrong. And if there are Christian nationalists out there, well, maybe I'm just not looking for them because I don't want to play with them. That might be part of it.
Maybe, but that doesn't invalidate
I'll give you that.
Why I basically peruse online for stuff. Well, not peruse online.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah.
So it's just, for me, is
right.
that
okay? So I'm seeing what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's just that I'm not really the most articulate person in that
you're not a
space,
denbulb either. Go for it.
But what I am not exactly scared, but fear's not a good word for it. But it's just the do you know the poem by forgot his name. Basically, when they come for me.
I'm sorry, but I thought you said that. Okay. Yeah. Yes, I do. Yeah.
Yeah, that poem.
Okay.
Specifically, essentially, the reason, in order to prevent this, that's what I'm doing,
Yeah.
essentially.
Okay. Now, and I'll throw a curveball at you. I'm Jewish, and I've had family, extended family, hunted by the Gestapo, and they were in Auschwitz. So I have,
Okay.
I wasn't, so like and I'm Jewish, and I'm Christian. So if a Muslim kills me, they get double points. So there's that. So I do understand what you're saying. My question to you would be, and this is, all right, I don't think this is pushback because you use the word fear, and that's reasonable. My question is there a spirit of fear on both sides of the fence that's unreasonable, that hasn't been properly vetted to be dissipated? The way you exercise a demon is you get to the root of the issue: fear, unforgiveness, the
Well,
secret.
all
Mhm.
right. Let's put up an example. And I said I'm not exactly fearful, as into the
Yeah.
point I'm scared shitless. What I'm saying is that I
Yeah.
can see the progression of authoritarianism and
Yeah.
basically mixed with theology that essentially traditionally is supposed to um, is traditionally supposed to have with the separation of church and state. And if you think that it's not does
Mhm.
not affect me, it's due to the
Right.
fact that in Canada there's something that's called that we colloquially call MAGA. All right, and every time that
Yeah.
something like every time
Before we go down
the
that road, Mhm.
yep. What do you want to say?
Sorry. Well, listen. I don't want to interrupt. I don't want. I apologize because it's like I could see. Like I just wanted to make the quick uh, 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 opinion. I see what you're saying about the authoritarian.
Oops. Um, is he Mo?
Well, looks like we lost him. Looks like we lost him.
Oops.
Well,
Anyway,
this is not a very chill conversation, Chris. I'm sorry to say we failed our own goal here to keep it chill.
well, I'm trying to be I'm trying to be as calm as possible. If that helps anything better, but
I don't know. Is there a difference between calm and chill? That's what it's making me wonder.
All right.
They are kind of synonymous. What do you think? Are they the same word or different words?
Well, if you by chill, that means that I'm super relaxed and stuff like that.
Well, I'm
No,
also speaking not
no.
only to just your personal comfort, but also like the vibes.
Well, what I'm saying is the vibes may be tense, but it's civil. That's what I'm saying right now.
Civil tense.
Yeah. Or at least I try to be
I think I
civil
agree. I
tense.
think we've done quite well, actually. I do think that you think I disagree with you more than I actually do. I think you'd be surprised at how much we actually
Well,
agree.
you haven't kicked me out.
Well, that's true. Ron, your service was very,
So,
very poor.
really? All right.
Yes.
Well, maybe it's a sign from God for me to shut up. I don't know.
Could be.
I'm not asking
I
you
do,
to
Chris.
shut
I
up.
wanted to apologize. No. I really did want to apologize because I felt myself cop an attitude a little while ago, and that was wrong of me. I felt it. I felt my hackles rise, and I'm like, no, dude. I'll be honest. This is just me. God will. He does not like. He will not tolerate that in me. That is not. That is not the spirit of God. Just want to let you know. Sorry. That was not kosher. But
Yeah.
I am interested in hearing your perspective, because if I'm going to be about what I say, I need to understand you're not my opponent. You just have a different perspective. And if anyone has fear, okay, I have family members that have kids that are in same-sex marriages.
Mm-hmm.
And when they found out I was a pro-Trump supporter, I have been cut out of my family, and because they're afraid. This was before the election. Um, they they went and got married because they thought Trump was going to stop all the gays were going to be rounded up and put in the gas chambers. It was that kind of.
And
I'll just
historically, that's true.
no,
Historically,
but I
that's
mean,
true.
this. I'm just saying, in my life, this is what I've dealt with. So, if anyone's had to be dealing with this Christian nationalism stuff, I've been on the receiving end of a beating for a while now, and maybe for quite a while. And I'm like, I need to be okay with it.
And into
And I'm
my
trying to. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and in my
Well, I mean,
assessment,
yeah.
it's fair for them. It's fair for them to label you as a Christian nationalist because it affects directly that like do harm is essentially a historical thing
Chris, I
that
think we're
is
being a little more.
tangible.
I think
Anyway,
we're being a little
sorry.
more civil with you than you're being with us, man.
Okay, so but that's
I
just
would.
my opinion.
Well, I mean, but that makes any Christian a Christian nationalist. I mean, am I wrong?
Well, as a knee-jerk reaction for self-preservation, yes.
Oh, okay, okay. At least so. Okay, I listen. I can work with this. I just
Okay.
because I'm asking where you're at.
For
At least, like I'm.
for for people just to let people to just not be tense, to see my emotions, I'm gonna put my camera. Okay, is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
There he is.
Okay.
The man, the myth, the
All right.
legend.
Okay.
Ta-da!
That's what you were keeping us from, dude. How dare
Well,
you?
technically, you know. Technically,
All right.
That's
technically,
true.
you know.
That is true. I have seen you before once.
Yeah.
I did.
Handsome
there you
fella.
go.
Handsome fella. Keeping that
Ooh,
away
look
from us
at
this
that.
whole time. And a nice stash, too.
I always thought you
Well,
you
Don't
do
be
well in New
bashful.
York.
Well, it's just me, I guess. Anyway,
All right.
so yeah. So it's just my assessment from knowing people that are LGBTQ. They basically
Okay.
acted out as a self-preservation, and if this got
So,
into a crossfire, I'm
what I want to
sorry.
do, what I want, am I interrupting or because I have a thought?
No, Ron, go.
My.
Go.
All right. So what I deal with is fear. Anything that is fear based. All right. I'll just throw it out this way. If you want to know how evil works, one of its favorite modes of operation is through fear. And if you can alleviate someone's fear in a real way, usually you can get to some sort of very cool spot emotionally, either for yourself or in between people. And with my family, there's no conversation. Like when you said that any Christian is a Christian nationalist.
I did say that, but I probably that's how you feel.
That's a problem because that's just way too broad of a brush. You didn't?
No, I didn't.
No. I
Say
thought so. I thought that's what you said.
no.
If
I didn't.
that's not what you said, I didn't hear you right. That's okay. Okay. No, I thought
Ron,
that's.
don't forget you've
Oh,
got a
okay.
little bit of a delay. So just remember
Oh,
some
that's
of the
on me then.
awkwardness. Yeah, some of the awkwardness you're feeling is you got a little bit of a
I
delay,
asked.
so no worries.
Okay. So what if we can circle around back to it? So is then I guess what's the difference between a good Christian or just a Christian?
Let's say, okay,
Christian and a Christian nationalist.
The only distinction.
Wow, my internet must be awful.
The only distinction for me personally, my definition of a Christian nationalism, like Christian of a Christian nationalist, is that they value Christianity above everything else. And I'm not talking about the love your neighbor, classic stuff, like not the like the typical thing about what's positive within the Bible or whatever. It is the understanding that Christianity, or even you can tack it on to like theocracy, like the threat of theocracy.
You mean, please?
It's that the Christianity is in a position of power. It is in a position of privilege, and everybody should essentially kowtow.
I think you're saying. I think you're saying a couple of things that can't be true at the same time. But
okay, so let's go through them.
Yeah. So, if Christianity is a privilege and a power, if Christianity has a power, its power is fairly voluntary, right? Like the church doesn't really have any say over you, and the only way they would have is if they were in political power over you, if it was already a theocracy. So I understand what you're saying about being afraid of a theocracy, but it seems bizarre and absolutely contradictory to me for you to say that Christianity is both oppressing you and should not be able to oppress you. You see what I'm saying? Like, you can't be afraid that Christian nationalism is going to take over because Christianity is oppressing you. Because if that were the case, living in a republic or a monarchy like you do, constitutional monarchy, you've already got all of the freedom that you would need. The church has no say over you. It's just a democracy. The second thing is
true.
What would you have those people care about more than Christianity? If the assertment is something like these people put their faith or their religious beliefs first in their lives, what type of beliefs or what type of things should they put before their religious beliefs?
Okay. All right. Let's. Sorry. What's the first point? Sorry, if you can just go by point. Your first point, if you can kind of reiterate it.
The first point is, how can Christianity both have power and privilege?
Okay. All right.
And then
I'm
also
gonna answer.
not have any control over your life. So much so that if it were to have any control over your life, that would be the type of thing that you would want to speak up vehemently about.
Okay. Let's. It is true that that the church has no power over the citizens currently. However, that is fickle, especially in the United States, because you have politicians that draft legislation that in some coded way use religious language to justify why we should
see, that's not a great argument either, because people always justify evil, right? They always have some reason to do the evil they do, and it doesn't correspond to, the fact that it's used as a justification doesn't say one way or the other whether it's true or not.
Okay, so
that's just people using information improperly, right? Like I'm with you that shouldn't be done, right? Like people shouldn't justify doing wrong with any. They should just own up to it, right? But like,
Okay.
we can't, just because somebody does something bad and they claim that they're justified in doing the bad thing because X reason, Y reason. It's just like a logical fallacy to say that, like, ergo, that proposition is untrue. For
Okay,
instance.
so I'll give you two examples. Okay. The
And one more thing, not to rush you, but I do need to like probably wrap it up in like 5-10 minutes.
Okay. All right. So
sleepy.
Okay. Sorry. Also, we can have this discussion a little bit like another time. But let me give you two examples that, for me personally, I refer to. Friendly atheist channel. I forget his name. Sorry, but it's the first one is.
What if his name was like Beelzebub, Lord of the Night?
No. It's a
friendly atheist, Beelzebub, Lord of the Night.
No, it's a Herman Nieta or something like that. Sorry, he's basically like Indian said, but anyhow, friendly atheist channel.
I just keep
on
thinking
YouTube.
Of demon names
on YouTube. Anyway, I'll just give
Wormwood,
you like
the friendly atheist.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
The two examples. First is the 10 Commandments in public schools in Louisiana.
Which one of the 10 Commandments don't you like?
Well, that's a whole lot of worms, but technically, for me, thou shalt have no gods before me. This is minute, especially in public schools, because you may have people of other religions in public schools.
So nobody gets any religion because there's a variety of religions. So nobody gets to do any religion at all.
As an academic,
authoritative secularism, tyrannical secularism reigns down so that all can be free.
As a mandatory state law, where you can have, you are required by law to have the 10 Commandments up on every classroom.
Required is one thing, but I don't think it should be necessarily disallowed either.
Well, you can check it.
I think if we live in a democracy, the people of that school district should be able to vote on it. It doesn't seem to be like it should be
Yes, but it wasn't. It wasn't vote on it. It was basically arbitrarily done by lawmakers.
Yeah, well,
second,
people like the Bible. I mean, I don't know what you want me to do about it. It's a pretty popular thing.
Anyway, the second example.
Our culture was also built upon it. That's kind of another hard thing to kind of get around.
The arbitrary decision to deny health care due to religious reasons.
What is that?
Abortion.
Is that something that's actually happening? Or is that that's like a hypothetical thing that Christian nationalists could do?
Yes, but it actually.
Are you speaking about specifically abortion?
Well, it could be abortion. It could be contraception. It could be trans surgeries.
Well, trans surgeries are also contraception.
Identity.
Trans surgeries are a type of contraception.
Treatments or whatever you want to. Look, please don't.
I don't know. Some of the things you're listing. I don't know if it's like the science. There's such new procedures. We don't even know the long-term effects of them. So it's kind of. I hear your points. The problem is, I don't think that they're very kind of like create. It's not there's nothing against the points. It's just that they're not new points. So what I could do is I could kind of rattle off the like responses that I've got like in my back pocket. We could do the like apologetics thing or whatever. But I'm just kind of not interested in that at all.
Okay.
But like I understand your worries. I have the same worries about that type of authoritarian, conservative, neo-traditionalist, type of situation. I just think that a lot of the times what's the reality is that the worst of the worst stuff from both sides gets used and thrown into your face as a psyop due to the social media that you follow and the affinity groups that you find yourself a part of. And so it's really important for one to come, I think, to a type of position where politics can become secondary to something that's more important. Because if politics is the most important thing to you, you end up seeing everything through the lens of politics. And the lens of politics is like very clouded by propaganda and by private interest. And that's not a type of government problem. That's a people problem. And so, yeah, like the problem is, Chris, and this is, I think you could actually probably use this line of argumentation to just kind of quell some of your fears, and not to say that you're like freaking out or shit in the bed or anything like that, but just kind of some of your concerns, is that Christianity, as I see it, could not get its ducks in a row if it had to. You know, to save itself, it could not agree on any type of political stance like that. It's so balkanized. It's so there's no there's no actual power other than cultural power. And in a democracy or a republic, you don't have a good argument against the zeitgeist. The zeitgeist is what it is, and you either trust the votes or you don't. And so that would kind of be my final word on it. But I do want to be generous and allow – my dog is still freaking out. I want to give you the final word, and then when you're done, I will play the beat that I made. And I hope everyone has a good night, sweet dreams. Matt Skakenstein, text somebody when you get home from your long commute. You know, and don't leave us hanging. You know, text somebody. It doesn't have to be us. Parsons, we got to talk soon because I got to get back into this bag. I got to get back into my Peter Rollins, sublating the subliminal, negating the negations. I got to get back into that Hegelian thinking. I've been thinking too much Augustine and too much Aquinas, too many of the church fathers, not enough Hegel, for my liking at least. But anyway, Chris, thanks so much for joining, dude, and thanks for showing face. It's much better this way. I like being able to see your expressions and your, you know, you got a friendly face. I'm not ashamed to say it. You got a friendly face. I like it.
Anyway,
strictly platonically.
Well, I hope so.
I'm a married man, Chris. Don't get any funny ideas.
Anyway, okay. But let me start. Well, I know that it'll probably. My final words would be a bit like angsty to some of you, but let's go back to 2016 when essentially Trump took into office. What happened in Charlottesville, Virginia? January 6th could not have happened without Charlottesville. And what you're seeing right now with LA, well, what's going on in LA and other places, cannot have happened without January 6th. So there's basically a history of chain of behaviors that the Trump administration has done, even though it's different staff and all that stuff, it's directed by the same guy. So that's what I'm saying. That
Beelzebub himself.
Leader
of the deep state. We finally agree on something, Chris. Yeah. Satan is the man behind the man pulling the strings.
Whatever. Well, I don't agree with that, but about saying Satan specifically. But
you don't think it's the devil himself?
It's just people. It's just
you think people are Satan?
No, people just doing, just people just playing stupid games, I guess, and playing with people's lives because they can.
Well, in the fate of such terrible odds, at least we have the time to share together on the internet, to be virtually not alone, and to chill on a Sunday chill stream. Thanks so much. I will see you next time, Chris. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I wish you all a good
30 seconds. I had a spirit, a very painful spirit, hit my hearing. It sounded like a Horcrux from Harry Potter. You know, that bad ringing sound. It was accompanied by pain. And it was for well over 24 hours, and I'm like, oh crap, this is my fault. What am I doing wrong? And I was talking with Afro on his stream the other night, and we teased it out. I was angry at a Christian, and I'm not saying this guy was right, but what I had to do as a Christian was to actually, in front of Afro and a few others, I confessed that I was offended, that I was angry, that I was wrong, and I had to pray for the dude, that the eyes of his understanding, of his heart, would know the heights, the depths, and the breadths and widths of the love of God. In my opinion, that's what Christian, if you want to know what Christian nationalism would look like, it would be, hey, I'm sorry for that thing I got offended at. Now, this is what I think you did might be wrong, but I'm sorry for what I did wrong in my response. And I just got better, it was earlier this morning that finally lifted off me. So, if anyone offends you, and this, especially me, this is going to sound odd, but suck it up, turn the other cheek. Yes, you're allowed to call it out, but know that people are fallen. They're going to act mean and irritated, especially if they don't even want to know Christ. They're going to act within their own understanding, and they're doing the best they can, and they're jacked up. And to expect any kind of good or perfection is really it ain't happening. So, but with a Christian, at least from my perspective, from my obligations to myself, it is to genuinely love my neighbor, to love God with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength, and then to love my neighbor as myself. And my last words, I hope, would be, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. So, that's the long way, what I had to say. And thanks for listening. But that was my rant. A very painful spirit hit my hearing. It sounded like a Horcrux from Harry Potter. You know, that bad ringing sound. Then it was accompanied by pain. And it was for well over 24 hours, and I'm like, oh crap, this is my fault. What am I doing wrong? And I was talking with Afro on his stream the other night, and we teased it out. I was angry at a Christian, and I'm not saying this guy was right, but what I had to do as a Christian was to actually, in front of Afro and a few others, I confessed that I was offended, that I was angry, that I was wrong, and I had to pray for the dude, that the eyes of his understanding, of his heart, would know the heights, the depths, and the breadths and widths of the love of God. In my opinion, that's what Christian, if you want to know what Christian nationalism would look like, it would be, hey, I'm sorry for that thing I got offended at. Now, this is what I think you did might be wrong, but I'm sorry for what I did wrong in my response. And I just got better, it was earlier this morning, it finally lifted off me. So, if anyone offends you, and this, especially me, it's going to sound odd, but suck it up, turn the other cheek. Yes, you're allowed to call it out, but know that people are fallen. They're going to act mean and irritated, especially if they don't even want to know Christ. They're going to act within their own understanding, and they're doing the best they can, and they're jacked up. And to expect any kind of good or perfection is really it ain't happening. So, but with a Christian, at least from my perspective, from my obligations for myself, it is to genuinely love my neighbor, to love God with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength, and then to love my neighbor as myself. And my last words, I hope, would be, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. So, that's the long way, what I had to say. And thanks for listening. But that was my rant.
Well, what's...
For 30 seconds. I had a spirit, a very painful spirit, hit my hearing. It sounded like a Horcrux from Harry Potter. You know, that bad ringing sound. And it was accompanied by pain. And it was for well over 24 hours, and I'm like, oh crap, this is my fault. What am I doing wrong? And I was talking with Afro on his stream the other night, and we teased it out. I was angry at a Christian, and I'm not saying this guy was right, but what I had to do as a Christian was to actually, in front of Afro and a few others, I confessed that I was offended, that I was angry, that I was wrong, and I had to pray for the dude, that the eyes of his understanding and his heart would know the heights, the depths, and the breadths and widths of the love of God. In my opinion, that's what Christian, if you want to know what a Christian nationalism would look like, it would be, hey, I'm sorry for that thing. I got offended at it. Now this is what I think you did might be wrong. I'm sorry for what I did wrong in my response. And I just got better. Like it's early this morning, it finally lifted off me. So if anyone offends you in this, especially like, it's gonna sound odd, but suck it up, turn the other cheek. Yes, you're allowed to call it out, but know that people are fallen. They're gonna act mean and irritated, especially if they don't even want to know Christ. They're gonna act on their own understanding, and they're doing the best they can, and they're jacked up. And to expect any kind of good or perfection is really good. It ain't happening. So, but with a Christian, at least from my perspective, from my obligations for myself, it is to genuinely love my neighbor, to love God with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength, and then to love my neighbor